Okay, hello Bio. We're continuing on with chapter 3 and section 6 about biodiversity. So remember, that's just the sum total of all the genetically different organisms living in the biosphere. And we talked about the last thing we left off was talking about the pollutant DDT. So if you remember, we talked about how it's non-biodegradable, which it means it cannot be broken down by organisms, and once it's picked up by organisms, it can't be eliminated from their bodies. And so we're going to talk about the problems of that that occurs with this. So when it enters a food web, it undergoes a process that is known as biological magnification. So this is an extremely important concept, so make sure you have this slide written down. If you don't write anything else down from this video, make sure you have this, because in biological magnification, concentrations of a harmful substance will increase in organisms at higher trophic levels in a food chain or food web. And in 1962, a biologist by the name of Rachel Carson, she wrote a book that is known as Silent Spring, which alerted people to the dangers of biological magnification. So no one really knew what was going on at this point in time with this DDT, but she wrote a book and it kind of showed us all the big problems that associated with this. So here's how DDT can build up, how the harmful substance increases in organisms at higher trophic levels in food chains or food webs. So our first step is we have water. So in this water, we have, you can see our orange dots, and that is the DDT. That is our pollution. So not too high of a concentration. However, there are plants that live in the water. So when the plants take up the water, they take up DDT, and the DDT gets stored in their tissue. So all these different producers, and you could also have a different picture of plants as well. So these are would be our phytoplankton, I guess, in this example. So the phytoplankton, they have to take in water to carry out photosynthesis, and when they take in the water, they take in all those orange dots, and so the orange dots build up inside of them. So it's still not a lot, but we go from 1 to 1,000 times more than what we had before. So inside our producers, inside these phytoplankton, we now have 1,000 times more because it's all concentrated inside their tissues. They can't eliminate it. So now the next big problem is that the phytoplankton, they serve as food for the zooplankton. So now the zooplankton, they have to eat a ton of phytoplankton in order to survive, and so therefore they're going to actually have more buildup now inside their tissues. So since they're eating phytoplankton that are full of DDT, they become full of DDT. And so now the concentration is up to 10,000 times the original. So it's just going to keep growing, and this is going to create a big problem because the zooplankton, they serve as food for very small fish. So the small fish, they have to eat a lot of those tiny zooplankton to survive, and since the zooplankton are full of DDT, now our fish are going to be full of DDT. So now we're up to 100,000 times the concentration that we had before. So it just keeps constantly increasing more and more. So the small fish, they have a bunch of DDT inside them now, but in kind of leading up, you can probably guess what's going to happen next. The small fish, they serve as food for large fish. So now we have 1,000,000 times greater concentration inside the large fish because they eat a bunch of small fish that has all this DDT inside of it. And then kind of their last step, the one that's at the most threat of this, or that was at the most threat of this DDT, are big fish-eating birds, the bald eagle being an example, and now we have up to 10 million times more inside the bald eagle because the bald eagle is constantly eating the big fish that have a ton of DDT inside it. So now the big fish-eating birds, again the example being the bald eagle, they all have a ton of DDT inside them. So this is a really important concept, and you're going to be able to need to explain that. So make sure, if you have any questions, write them down about this and ask me in class. And so the widespread of the use of DDT had threatened the populations of many animals, especially fish-eating birds like the bald eagle, with extinction. But by the early 1970s, we kind of realized this problem by that book, and DDT was banned in the United States and in other industrialized countries as well. And as a result, our bird populations have recovered. So our bird populations were in actually in really big trouble at that time. But we noticed the problem, we fixed it, and now our bird populations have recovered. So that's it for how pollution can affect. So another thing that can affect our biodiversity are introduced species, and this comes from when plants and animals that humans transport around the world are either accidentally or intentionally introduced into an area that they don't belong. So this comes a process known as an invasive species. So these are introduced species that reproduce rapidly because their new habitat lacks the predators that would control their population. So right now, a big example is down in Florida, people buy these big snakes as pets, these Burmese pythons, I believe. I'm not exactly sure which ones they are, but there's some type of large python that are native to other parts of the world, but they get gigantic, so people buy them. They don't have room to keep them in their cage anymore, so they just release them, and now basically in the Everglades, down in the swamps there, they're taken over because there's nothing that can naturally eat these snakes, and they can just basically kind of go free for all, and they can reproduce, and they can destroy habitats that would be normally occupied by the natural inhabitants. And a couple other examples is that there's something called zebra mussels in the Great Lake, and then a plant called the leafy spurge that's found across the northern Great Plains, and these are already causing ecological problems in the U.S. So the zebra mussels, they basically get on anything. They can get in, they can kill other animals, they can actually block up kind of some piping as well, so they cause a lot of problems. In this other plant, it can just basically grow anywhere, so it's going to steal nutrients from other plants and not allow them to grow. So those are all problems that we've had. So now we need to be able to conserve our biodiversity. So conservation is just simply the wise management of our natural resources, including the preservation of habitats and wildlife. So conservation is a big thing in conserving, obviously, our biodiversity. And many conservation efforts are aimed at managing individual species to keep them from becoming extinct. Again, like we found with the bald eagle, DDT was really affecting their numbers, so we got rid of that. People were hunting them, we got rid of that. So we just basically were able to save our species whenever we see that they're in trouble. We have a direct plan in order to keep them from becoming extinct. And so then I guess kind of going along with this, some of our goals is to focus on protecting entire ecosystems as well as a single species. So we want to make sure that we don't lose any habitats. And then protecting an ecosystem will ensure that our natural habitats and the interactions of many different species are preserved at the same time. So again, we can't, if we just lost one organism, it could affect an entire ecosystem and all the things that go with it, so we need to make sure we protect all that. However, it's not really simple just to protect everything, because protecting resources for the future can require people today to change the way they earn their living. So maybe, again, those giant factories, maybe if they're causing too much problems, destroying natural ecosystems, things like that. So maybe someone's going to have to change in order for our future generations to preserve and see the things that we get to see today. And then conservation regulations must be informed by solid research and must try to maximize benefits while minimizing economic costs, because that's always a problem, is money. People don't know if they have enough to really carry out all these conservation efforts. So that's it for section 3. Let me know if you have any questions.